Traction control in Le Mans Ultimate. It's not as simple as in a lot of other sims, is it? Instead of just one TC setting, you have traction control, TC power cut and TC slip angle. What do they do exactly and how do you set them correctly? And especially after the latest tire model update, how do you keep the car as stable as possible while not sacrificing much lap time? After doing a lot of testing, I've discovered some things that really surprised me, but also found a great baseline of these three settings for me and you, which should work better than the default, especially for beginners. But before we get to that, it's important to understand the TC settings first, so we can make adjustments on the right settings later as well. Let me show you something. Here's the Ford Mustang with default settings. Watch what happens when I try to accelerate from a standstill. Okay, this is the classic application for traction control. The tires are spinning like crazy. Your first thought is probably just turn up the TC setting, right? Let's try that. Still spinning. So this is not the TC setting you might be used to from other sims. Now let's try increasing the TC power cut instead with leaving traction control at default. Look at that, the spinning stops. But now the car accelerates painfully slowly. We fixed one problem but created another. And that's the classic trade-off you have with traction control. Too little and you spin, too much and you're not going anywhere, or at least only very slowly. If you look at the Aston Martin here, which does not have the spinning tires problem on default settings, you can see that it doesn't matter whether you turn off traction control or TC power cut completely. The behavior is almost the same, because these two settings work in conjunction with each other. And we haven't talked about the TC slip angle setting at all yet, because it doesn't really affect this very simple use case. So before we go any further, let me give you the technical definitions. Traction control is the threshold for longitudinal slip. TC power cut is the amount of throttle being cut, and TC slip angle is the threshold for lateral slip. These definitions don't really help much, do they? So let me put this in simpler terms. Traction control sets how much wheel spin is allowed before the system kicks in. So think of this as the setting for if you put the power down too aggressively in a straight line and the tires would just spin. It only sets when the system activates though, not by how much. That is being done by TC power cut, which determines how aggressively the system cuts power when it does activate. So even if you have traction control set very high, if you have low power cut, you will still get wheel spin. TC slip angle, contrary to the first traction control setting, sets how much the car can slide sideways before intervention. So think of this setting as allowing or denying you to power slide, so how much slip angle the system allows on power before it activates, even if there is no wheel spin. TC slip angle once again only sets when it activates, not by how much. That is still being determined by TC power cut. So TC power cut affects both TC slip angle and the traction control setting. I hope that you understand what the settings do now. But if you're like me, that still doesn't really help you yet in setting them up correctly. So I did a bunch of testing with a lot of different combinations of settings. Let's look at the Aston Martin here, with which I did a lot of testing around Monza. I tried some extreme settings that sound crazy on paper. TC at 0, power cut at 11 and slip angle at 11, which are the maximum by the way. Have a look at this lap at Monza. Pay attention to the LEDs at the top of the cockpit, they show when traction control is active. Even though 0, 11, 11 as TC settings seem very weird, the car felt incredibly drivable. Yes, you need to be careful accelerating from very low speeds, but look at how smooth everything else is. Because of the high TC slip and TC power cut, the system activates at very little slip already and cuts a lot of power. That makes it feel super safe, but at the same time it also doesn't feel slow at all. And that's because the classic traction control is basically off, meaning you won't lose much power accelerating in a straight line. As I said, the only problem with these settings was accelerating out of low speed turns, where you need to be very careful with throttle application because you're missing the traction control system, which activates when there's wheel spin. Overall, these TC settings felt incredibly good and fast though. This lap will be our benchmark for further testing, so keep it in mind. Now let's flip this around. Traction control and TC power cut both at 11, slip angle at 0. Once again, the car feels super safe, but it's terribly slow. Look at those LEDs again when I accelerate out of corners. They're flashing for a long time. And look at how much speed and time we're losing in every acceleration zone. Not having TC slip angle working at all did not feel like a big downside here because of how much the classic traction control was kicking in. Maybe with really throwing the car into corners it would have been a problem, but I was so slow everywhere that it really didn't feel like an option. By the way, if you appreciate all the testing I've done for this video, please hit that like button, that really helps me out more than you know. Thank you. Getting back to the footage, this lap was over 2 seconds slower than the previous one. So these settings are obviously not it. For comparison, I went back to the default settings. Here's a lap with those. It feels fine, but not amazing. I'm lacking a bit of confidence in certain sections, especially the mid to high speed ones. But it does feel a lot better out of low speed corners, which makes sense, but also will make us slower. You can see we're losing time compared to the 0-11-11 settings. But those felt a bit sketchy at times out of slow corners, as I said. So maybe there's a way of combining the two. And there is. After extensive testing across multiple cars, I've come up with a method that not only works consistently across all cars I've tried, but it also combines the speed and stability of the 0-11-11 settings and the safer acceleration out of slow corners of the default settings. So here's what I've come up with. Take the default settings of your car and reduce traction control to half, round up if you need to, leave power cut as is, and turn slip angle to 11. Sounds too simple to be good? Well, I can tell you that this approach has made every car I've tested feel not only more stable, but also faster than with the default settings. Don't believe me? Remember my video about the best beginner cars? I said the Aston Martin wasn't beginner friendly because of problems with spinning out. And during that testing, it also was by far the slowest car for me. I could never go below a 148 at Imola with it, while with other cars I was doing times between 146 and 147. With these adjusted settings, I went back to Imola in the Aston and I was shocked. The car felt way better. I suddenly had confidence and also didn't feel like the TC settings from the default setup were slowing me down. And I also managed a 146.4. That's a massive improvement of over 1.5 seconds for me. Okay, so far we were only looking at front engine cars. This method of setting up TC works across all types of cars for me, however. So let's look at another example. The Porsche at Fuji, which gave me trouble before and felt unsafe in certain sections. But with the new settings, the Porsche feels safer and I was able to go quicker than I ever had before. Not by as much, but it was still awesome to see easy settings that make me go faster and also gave me more confidence. What about mid-engine cars? Here's the Ferrari at Imola, which previously I also couldn't really recommend as a beginner car. But same procedure, reduce traction control by half, leave power cut as is and max out TC slip angle. Once again, the car does feel safer and I was even able to go a little bit faster than before. This method just works. By reducing the longitudinal slip threshold, keeping the power cut as is, and maximizing the lateral slip threshold, you create a setup that gives you confidence while maintaining speed. This approach has transformed cars I previously struggled with into enjoyable, fast machines and even improved the feel of the ones I already felt good with. But I don't want you to take my word for it. Go test this method yourself and let me know what you think. Maybe with feedback we can make this method even better. Of course, it's not the be-all and end-all and also is geared more towards beginner to intermediate drivers. There are certainly adjustments to be made, not only for different drivers and skill levels, but also conditions. For example, in the rain, I would increase traction control by 1 or 2 and maybe even power cut if it's really wet. But maybe that's a topic for a later video. If you want to see that, then also feel free to subscribe to the channel. And speaking of settings that aren't as straightforward as they seem, make sure to check out my recent video on the ABS settings after the latest update, which I will link for you on screen right now. Not understanding these changes to ABS can also make you lose a lot of lap time. But that's it from me. I want to thank you a lot for watching. I've been HG Racing and I will hopefully see you in the next one.